Morning guys, morning, how are you? I'm going to talk to you about, on the surface, what is three unrelated events. I say on the surface, you can make your own minds up. So number one, the Balfour Agreement. 100 years ago, 1917, Lord Balfour signed a letter to Lord Rothschild agreeing in principle to the establishment of a Zionist, and that is the word used, a Zionist Jewish state in what was then Palestine, on the basis that non-Jewish and other related people in the area would not be prejudiced against. At the time, in those days, many of you may not know, but Jews and Palestinians, largely Muslim, lived in peace as neighbors, one next to each other. There was no, you're in this area with a fence around you and I'm in this area with a fence around you. They lived in an open, sprawling, multi-religious state in 1917. If you take the time out and you have a few moments, Google the borders of Palestine pre the UN agreement in 47, post the 67 Six-Day War, which is its own dark history as to what triggered that, and today, in terms of what's left of Palestine. And you'll find, apart from fleckled little spots after originally being 85% of the landmass, you have a controlled open-air prison called Gaza and fleckled spots. And the Zionist state now exists. This was signed by a man who was a member of the Round Circle. And the Round Circle is a secret society that was set up and funded by Rothschild. So here you had someone writing a letter to somebody else who was paying him on behalf of cabinet and the government, making a pledge for a piece of land that he had no longer jurisdiction over and a people that he had no governance over, aka Palestinians. And there was a small percentage of indigenous Jewish based people in Palestine. Think where we are now, and the walls, the forced removals, and the substandard. Palestinians fall under Israeli military law in Gaza, whilst newly taken occupied territories, ex-Palestinian Israeli settlers of Zionist religion, fall under civilian Israeli law. Just think about that for a bit. Then I'm going to tell you about another event. So 100 years ago that started with the likes of Rothschild and his bought off entities such as Mr. Balfour or Lord Balfour. Then I want to tell you about two articles. So this is my troika for you today. One directly under the other on the same page of a newspaper, and I don't stop to read these newspapers at all every day, but once every now and then when I have 15 minutes to spare, I see what's the lie for today. Gordon Brown says Iraq was a mistake and America hid information from him. Here's someone trying to protect his reputation. At the 2010 Chilcot inquiry, he had no such second thoughts. Despite the whole population of Britain, despite winning that war and finding none, despite Hans Blix and all the guys saying there were none, despite the dodgy dossier revelations, courtesy of Alistair Campbell, probably at the fulcrum of all that, a more evil and snide and malicious Zionist I can't think of. And you suddenly have this man having retrospective angst to protect his reputation in a new book here in 2017, While he swore blind in 2010 it was the right action to do, even then when everyone ruled. That Chilcot inquiry, that took the better part of 10 years to materialize, to protect yours truly, Tony Blair, and himself, from decisions they made in 99, 2000, 2001, 2002, during that era, that the whole of Britain now knows was a farce and a lie. So you have the creation of a Zionist state, for which, with a family that war is peace and peace is war, with a war banker history that's funded every revolution from the French Revolution through the Bolsheviks, Warburg funding the German side in World War I, and other factions that are part of his cartel funding both sides in World War I and II. Now in a situation where they had Britain go to war, there's British soldiers minus limbs, supposedly routing this evil entity, this extreme evil, Saddam Hussein, as if there's one person that is always extreme evil, and we're always the good guys that just have a bit of collateral damage along the way. Under that article is an article on Dr. David Kelly. Dr. David Kelly, you may remember this man, those that are in the UK. The state is going to secretly exhume and remove his bones. So doctors and signs have been put up by his grave demanding an inquiry. His inquiry on his death was called a suicide, although there was very little blood on the scene. His wrists were sliced open, and the paramedics that arrived said there was no way that he died of that. There was virtually no blood at the scene, yet the man was dead under a tree, sitting propped up. This man was the man behind the claims to the BBC under anonymity of being a sexed up document for the Iraq War, which turned out to be 100% correct, both in Gilligan's case and in Kelly's case. And we live with the repercussions today, still. And this man, because signs were put up demanding an inquiry, his inquiry was suspended for the Hutton inquiry, which became the biggest whitewash and branded the BBC, castrated, led to all the directors resigning because of Gilligan. Gilligan had to resign for exposing the fact that the case for the war was not made, committing the state to a huge illegal war, and this man lost his job for doing so. Kelly lost his life. Kelly was found to be the source, and in one of the most despicable acts of a government official employee, was exposed by yours truly, little vermin snake that gets wheeled out still to this day on BBC, Alistair Campbell. When people asked who was the source, he sort of said, not him, until they said the name. So that he could avoid claiming that he actually said who the source was. He just failed to not rule him out whilst ruling out all others that it could be. So in a short list of state employees with expertise on weapons of mass destruction, he nodded and winked at the appropriate moment to expose a quiet, introverted public sector worker that had no reason to be brought into this or be exposed, that led to his subsequent death under extremely suspicious circumstances, that now sees the state go and wish to secretly exhume his bones to prevent the trail of people and doctors demanding a further inquiry into the nature of his death on the basis that there was never a suicide, and the alleged claim in the Hutton inquiry that said he slit his wrists, where the paramedics found him propped up against a tree with no blood present, and assumed that the death had taken place elsewhere and that the body had been brought to that point. And that there were very quickly two shady, unidentified, not in uniform characters assumed to be that of the Secret Service at the site after they called it in. They were the first to arrive. Within minutes, men in suits arrived. Think Men in Black, the movie. So here you have the creation of the Zionist state, the war, the slow motion apartheid, the slow motion land grab, the slow motion extermination and undermining of rights, and taking the key land in the two blue lines of the Israeli flag, the Tigris and the Euphrates, taking that land in a slow mission creep, with every paramilitary general being only people considered to be ever the head of this country. If you have not been in Mossad or a general in the army, you are never to be a prime minister. No civilian is in this war paramilitary state. Taking all the land from Palestinians. Then you have Brown covering his tracks like the little weaseling worm he always was, standing by his story with that bigger worm, Tony Blair and Campbell and all the little media spinners, saying now in his books it was a mistake, trying to say I came around in the end, I'm a good guy, we were misled by the Americans. But the whole British nation state knew even within a year. I remember the headline. I was here in the UK. I came out on Finchley Road to see an Evening Standard article. Iraq could send within 45 minutes dirty bombs into London, drop dirty bombs into London. Later to be explained as they had mortars that they had, and there was a belief that there was some chemicals lying around that they could put in a mortar head. A mortar. And I was given the impression ICBMs could be dropped on London and it was imminent and they could engage that within 45 minutes. We should all be fearing for our lives. That is the story of your media. That is the story of Gordon Brown. That is why there is no criticizing the Balfour Agreement in the BBC. There is no criticizing the conduct of an apartheid slow motion genocide state that is funded by the clan that brings you war on every corner. The clan that signs every deal in blood, that finances and backs and does dirty deeds with secret societies to get exactly what it wants. See those items as unrelated, or see them for what they are, in my view. And of course, in passing, Kevin Spacey and Weinstein, Hollywood Zionists, molesting, creating the narrative and acting out the narratives of Hollywood, the mouthpiece of education and history for those that no longer read. Hollywood, the cesspit. Anyway, I'll leave you with that thought, and enjoy your Sunday, and we'll speak again soon.